Viridiana Rios is a global fellow with the Wilson Center's Mexico Institute. She's also a fellow at Harvard's David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies and a former advisor to Mexico's Ministry of Finance. Welcome back, Viridiana. Great to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
So when last we left off, we were talking in a previous interview about crime in Mexico and the cost of violence. You've written some interesting articles that say that Mexico is shifting from a war on drugs to a war on corruption. Could you expand on that thought?
Absolutely. There is an enormous change in how Mexico is perceiving its own challenges. During the last, I would say, 7 years, starting in 2007, actually a little bit more than that, starting in 2007, the country saw as its most important challenge the reduction in violence. From 2007 to 2011, homicides doubled in Mexico, which is a lot to say. That was happening because a lot of drug cartels were battling in between each other, and there was changes in law enforcement institutions that actually creating further instability in these illegal markets of drugs. However, starting probably in 2013, after a series of scandals started emerging, particularly among the federal government and some important figures in the Mexican federal government, there has been this enormous change in how people is framing Mexico's issues. It is right now the most important concern by far to reduce corruption. And actually, we've started to realize that probably the most important reason why Mexico is so violent, why Mexico is unable to grow, why Mexico faces so many other challenges like inequality, even poverty, are deeply ingrained into a culture that has survived being corrupt and using corruption as a main tool for business.
This sounds promising. It sounds like it's a better focus on a core problem.
It is a focus on a problem that I would say affects Mexicans most. Actually, the big problem for the Mexican constituency was that they thought that the war against drugs was really a favor that Mexico was doing to the U.S. Because at the end of the day, you know, the demand for drugs comes from the U.S. Certainly, this is a problem that seems to be more targeted into Mexico, but it is way more difficult to address.
More complex.
Way more complex.
And speaking of articles you've written here, ultimately this comes down to corruption, battling corruption as a matter of law and a justice system. You wrote this in a recent piece. The truth is even that the cleanest, most committed public officer would find it difficult to prosecute someone for corruption because there are few legal tools to fight such types of crime in Mexico.
There are few legal tools, and there are few politicians that want to create those legal tools. So what is happening right now...
Because they're involved in the corruption, or they're afraid?
We don't know.
Yeah.
But the point is that they are covering each other, and nobody is actually putting up front a law that is viable and that actually address these issues. So what has happened is that it has been civil society, it has been academics, think tanks, NGOs, the ones that have come together in Mexico, and this is unedited. This never happened before. They have come together to basically design, write the bills, and push them in Congress. So it is civil society, the one that is becoming a lobbyist.
And what is the update on this citizens initiative? It had just happened. The first stage had just happened last time we spoke. What is the progress in getting all of the necessary signatures?
They got all of the necessary signatures. So just to remember what we discussed last time, civil society put together a bill. They needed to gather about 120,000 signatures in order for this bill to be discussed in the Congress. They got 500,000. That's probably the most impressive mobilization of civil society that has happened in Mexico on, peaceful terms.
Sure.
So this is incredible because this is telling us that it is in the hands now of civil society to keep fighting this battle, which is going to be very hopeful for the country because it's generating this environment of a lot of young people, like in the streets actually looking for firms and looking to change the system.
But they need help inside the system too, correct? I mean, I remember this harkens back to this debate between the certain Martin Luther King or Malcolm X and Thurgood Marshall. How do you change things? Thurgood Marshall argued it had to be from within. It had to be from the system. So are there champions within Congress or elsewhere within the system who are willing to help?
Well, basically there are 3 different initiatives presented by parties. The right party, PAN, presented an initiative that is actually very similar to civil society. The left party, PRD, also presented a bill, and the current party on government also presented a bill. These last two are a little bit less, I would say, encompassing, less holistic. But certainly what is happening right now is that forces are aligning inside the Congress. It is supposed to be discussed probably late April. And it must be, in case it is approved, it must be approved during this term.
What's your most optimistic outlook as far as the potential for significant and speedy action?
I believe this bill is going to be approved. But most important than approving this bill, I think what this is really showing is that Mexicans are ready and willing to change the system by themselves.
The Panama Papers, speaking of corruption, are there implications for Mexico?
One of the most important contractors of the Mexican president, actually the contractor that did his house, which was also a big corruption scandal, is known as the White House scandal, is in the Panama list. However, right now what we know about this is that the Mexican authorities are investigating at least 33 different people in Mexico. They say it's going to take about a month to conduct the investigation, and if something comes out, then probably a whole trial is going to take about a year, probably a little bit more than a year.
I wonder, and your thoughts on this, and this is just speculation, but does the momentum created by the reaction to this story, the release of these so-called Panama Papers, do you think this creates some momentum that civil society can latch onto in Mexico?
Absolutely, and that's something that we are not seeing right now. I mean, there is a lot of indignation in civil society about the Panama Papers, but I guess people is like so shocked, and also the media didn't cover, like, the established media in Mexico didn't cover it a lot. That probably Mexico is still focused more on the general scandals of its own political elite and not really looking so much into the private entities that are linked to the Panama list.
So what's next for Mexico? What can we expect as far as the near term and the long term?
Yes, so first, approving this bill that is going to be discussed by the end of April. Second, a second bill needs to be created. Probably civil society is also going to be very involved into the design of that bill. And most important, implementation. Mexico is the country of the reforms, is the country where laws are changed and then nothing happens. We cannot allow corruption to be one more of those reforms that are perfect in paper, but are not changing reality.
Well, Viridiana, it's obvious that you're very excited about the things that are happening, and we enjoy your coverage and look forward to speaking to you again as the story develops.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.